British national overseas passport holder. I'll believe when I see it. But I do agree with you generally, Phil. I mean, there could be a brain drain.
Just a question, because there's a bit of interest in this. Wallace, can you ask your guest what's in this for China? If they, while, quote-unquote, out of Hong Kong as a finance centre, what does the Communist Party get out of it?
Well, I think they have been quite happy to let the other major Chinese cities, Shenzhen, Shanghai and so forth, be the big financial hubs. So in many ways, Hong Kong has become more and more sacrificial in their eyes. I mean, it's no longer a manufacturing hub. It is, I suppose, a gateway between East and West, but if certain countries carry out their threats, such as the US, then what special status does Hong Kong have after that? People might just deal with Shanghai if they want to deal with the Chinese economy. So they may just centralise their power within the mainland.
All right, Jack Yan, appreciate you being on the program. Thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Phil, that sort of shift, that business shift from Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's right. It's been going on for some time, as a matter of fact.
Has it?
Yeah, so the Chinese have been investing, Jack's absolutely right about that. They've been investing in places like Shenzhen, just a massive city now across the border, of course, and also in Shanghai as the financial capital. And, of course, for them, that's about control, because they don't quite control Hong Kong. So they're suspicious of that, of course, and so they want control. And they've got the wherewithal to do that. So that's why they're building new financial centres and new business centres elsewhere on the mainland.
Just finally, someone asked if there was a bubble that opened up with New Zealand, where is the first place that you'd like to go? Around the panel, Catherine.
Oh, I want to go to Iceland. I've never been. I've always wanted to go.
Totally,
because they do well at Eurovision.
They do.
That's the
Not
reason,
quite the first thing I was sitting and
Back to
thinking
the
of one of
music
those
for you, Phil.
volcanic hot spells, that'd be great.
I'd go to Sydney because a lot of my family are there and a lot of my friends. So I'd probably, I know that's a boring call, but I'd probably go there, I must say.
Are you hoping that we can do that soon?
I'm forever hoping. I mean, this goes to creativity. I mean, I'd love to be able to open a bubble to New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, West Australia, Northern Territory. But of course, the Australian government's not going to allow that
because of the Victoria.
Yeah, Victoria, that's right. Oh. Because actually, the rest of these states really don't have the same problem that Victoria does. Now, that's not going to happen because Prime Minister Morrison said that he's only going to open Australia, not the states. Well, fair enough. That's the way things goes. But I'm not particularly hopeful there'll be a border opening to Australia this time at Christmas. Frankly, I think that's quite a long way away.
When do you expect?
Oh, I'd say around Christmas time. I mean, there's talk about summer tourism. Maybe that's summer, isn't it? Sort of December time. So I think it's about then that we'll.
We always use Christmas as it'll be over by Christmas, or it'll be open by Christmas.
Yeah. And of course, the election's gone by then, so the politics is a little less fierce at this side of the Tasman.
Ugh.
Are both of you looking across? I mean, particularly in light, going back to the start of the show, what happened today when? The countdown in the centre of the city has shut down. People, had to go home to self-isolate. Are you concerned that what might happen in Melbourne might happen here?
It's always a challenge, of course, but it goes back to our trust and use of technology, contact tracing, and so on. That's the way to minimise that risk. But of course, it's a risk. Could happen, sure.
I think it just shows that it can happen anywhere, and we've just got to play it safe.
Yep. Catherine Robinson, Phil O'Reilly, you've been wonderful. Thank you very much for your time.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, a COVID-positive man goes walkabout from an Auckland isolation hotel while on a smoke break. So why didn't security stop him and where did he go? Minister Megan Woods joins us live. Hamish Walker is walking away from politics, but you'll be paying him until September. We're in his Clusa Southland electorate. Is the government caving into Waitomo's big tourism operators while ignoring the little guys? Hundreds of millions of dollars is poured into upgrading our drinking water. And across the ditch, the COVID lockdown in Victoria could spread to neighbouring states. Hunker down, it's brass monkeys, cold, that is, up and down the country. Don't forget, you can catch us live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata tēnei. A security guard saw the man who was New Zealand's newest case of COVID-19 leave the Stamford Plaza last night but thought he was a fencing contractor. The man in his 30s returned to Auckland from New Delhi on July the 3rd. He was tested yesterday before his escape and the positive test result came back today. He was able to sneak out through the hotel's smoking area as the fences were being replaced. Air Commodore Digby Webb says a guard mistook him for someone working on the fences. The man was missing for 70 minutes and was only found when he returned at 8 p.m. after going to the Countdown store on Victoria Street West. The Health Minister Chris Hipkins says the man knew he wasn't supposed to be out and knew the ramifications.
This person broke the law. They did so deliberately and willfully. That is not acceptable. They are letting down the whole team of 5 million when they do that, and we have zero tolerance for that. There are legal avenues available to the government, and I would expect that those legal avenues will be fully pursued.
Chris Hipkins says an immediate review into security and smoking arrangements at facilities will now take place. The man will be charged and faces a maximum of 6 months in prison or a $4,000 fine. Satine was at the Countdown store last night and is angry with the man.
Never had an idea someone could be that nasty. Because this is New Zealand. We don't do that. We respect each other. We help each other. Until today, I'm very mad because now I have to go and check it out and I cannot work anymore.
Satine says he endangered others. The National Party leader is adamant his leadership hasn't been undermined by disgraced National MP Hamish Walker. The Clutha Southland MP has confirmed he will not be seeking re-election later this year after revealing he was behind the leaking of COVID-19 patients' details to media. It took 4 days for Mr Walker to tell his leader after seeking legal advice. However, Todd Muller pushed back against questions this afternoon from reporters that it showed he didn't have control of his MPs.
No, it said that Hamish Walker went behind my back and made his own judgment, and I'm sure that he is ruining it today.
Todd Muller says the leak is an isolated incident and as leader he acted swiftly. Voters in Mr Walker's electorate are shocked he's behind the leak. One Queenstown local, Anne, says he's made the right decision not to stand again.
I was really disappointed from someone who represents us. I felt like he'd made a really poor decision. It didn't go out to the public, so I don't know how that stands from a legal perspective, but I feel like his values are in question about why he was doing that.
Anne, a voter in the Clutha Southland electorate. The Australian Prime Minister says it will be some time before a travel bubble with New Zealand will be allowed. Melbourne is preparing to enter a 6-week lockdown from tonight, and Scott Morrison says the latest outbreak of COVID-19 in Victoria is significant and disappointing. He says that is his focus.
We haven't even concluded any arrangements with any other countries at the moment, and it'll be some time yet before we even were able to achieve that even for New Zealand or potentially any countries in the Pacific. I'm not here to tell people what I'm thinking about. I'm here to tell people what we're doing. And the government has focused on dealing with what's happening right now in Australia.
Scott Morrison says right now there are no plans to reimpose restrictions in other parts of Australia. However, he says officials are considering limiting the number of citizens and residents able to return home from overseas. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 5. The stand-in England cricket captain Ben Stokes says regular skipper Joe Root has given him a simple piece of advice ahead of tonight's first test with West Indies. Do it your way. With Root missing for the birth of his second child, Stokes will lead England in Southampton as the West Indies chase their first series win in England since 1988, when Viv Richards was at the helm.
I don't have much advice, so there's been a lot of opinions, but the best message that I've received was when I got my photos done in the blazer. Rooty just left a message on the hanger, said do it your way.
Ben Stokes. The match will be played in an empty stadium due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The new Wallabies coach, Dave Rennie, remains confident his first international assignment will be against the All Blacks in Wellington in October, despite the pandemic. A week into his new role, the former Chiefs coach is still a month away from being able to join his new team in Australia. Rennie's currently at home in Palmerston North, having spent 2 weeks in quarantine in Auckland, and will head to Sydney in a couple of weeks with another quarantine period in store. His sole focus is October 10th, which he remains adamant will be the date for the first Bledisloe Cup test in Wellington, even though details of the Trans-Tasman series are yet to be announced. Spanish tennis legend Rafael Nadal has cast further doubt on the prospect of defending his US Open tennis title in September, confirming he intends playing in the Madrid Open, which starts a day after the Open finishes. That's the news.
Questions to answer.
This is not the National Party that I lead. It's not the culture that I expect from my team. And bluntly, there needs to be consequences.
Unanswered questions.
You've asked the question 3 times.
No, and you haven't answered it.
I have given you an answer to my satisfaction.
You've answered something that wasn't the question.
And unheeded warnings to government about threats to Muslims.
Incompetent, ineffective, inefficient, disinterested and ignorant about Muslim issues, that nothing happens.
Working for you, Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Showers, possibly squally thunderstorms as well today. Showers clearing south of Hamilton tonight and elsewhere tomorrow. Westerly gales from Northland to Waitomo and Western Bay of Plenty easing this evening. For the remainder of the North Island, rain with snow lowering to about 600 metres, easing to a few showers tonight. Showers becoming confined to Wairarapa, Eastern Wellington and Taihape tomorrow with snow to 400 metres for a time. For Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland, increasing fine spells. Canterbury, a few showers, mainly about the coast and Banks Peninsula, with snow lowering to 300 metres about Banks Peninsula tonight. Showers clearing tomorrow afternoon. For Otago, Southland, Fiordland, showers with snow to 300 metres until tonight. Showers clearing about North and Central Otago and Dunedin tomorrow. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, showers tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna, and this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, Clutha Southland MP Hamish Walker walks away from politics. But let's start this evening with a runner. There are calls for tighter security in managed isolation after a man who tested positive for COVID-19 escaped a hotel to visit a supermarket. A security guard was watching as the man left the Stamford Hotel in Auckland last night, but thought he was a fencing contractor. The returnee in his 30s was gone an hour and 10 minutes. Authorities are reviewing CCTV footage to track his exact movements. The man, who will be charged under public health laws, arrived from New Delhi on July 3rd. Amy Williams with the story.
Anyone planning to do their grocery shop at the Victoria West Street Countdown today turned up only to find the store closed for a deep clean. One woman, Satine Liu, was in the store last night, shortly after the man who escaped managed isolation had bought items, including toothpaste.
I absolutely understand the importance of how you're going to control yourself and then keep the community safe. But this guy is very selfish. Like, literally, no matter where he's coming from or whatsoever, it's just, this is not ethical.
Others were also turned away from doing their shopping today. Tyler Proud wants to know how the man was able to escape with the military on guard.
Just to hear the man be able to get out for 70 minutes, you know, that's a long time for someone to be missing out of quarantine, you know, and you'd think there'd be safety precautions in there. If the military's unable to, you know, keep a hold on them, then what's to say anything else will?
Liam Catchpole thinks there should be tighter security.
For something so serious as well, and how it's killing a lot of people, they should have higher precautions put in place, you know?
Countdown's General Manager of Health and Safety, Kiri Hannafin, says they're incredibly disappointed a man with COVID-19 visited the supermarket, which closed today for cleaning. The man had been tested on Tuesday, but the result wasn't known until this morning. All 18 staff who were working at the supermarket last night have been asked to isolate themselves as a precaution and will be tested in the next few days. The man with COVID-19 who escaped was up to his 4th day at the hotel. Air Commodore Digby Webb says he was seen leaving the facility, but security guards wrongly thought he was a worker.
The security guard was there and observed the scenario with the fencing contractors moving the fences in place and was not clear whether or not this was a contractor or indeed the person who was in there for a period of smoking.
When he realised the man was one of the hotel's residents, the security guard alerted the police, who started searching. He was gone for a total of 70 minutes before returning voluntarily at 8 o'clock last night. Authorities are currently reviewing CCTV footage to see where else he was during this time. The circumstances of his escape will now be the subject of a review. Air Commodore Webb says they'll be assessing security and smoking arrangements at the facilities.
He was being observed. There was contractual staff removing the fences and replacing them at night time. So once again, we will be considering the full policy considerations around the smoking area, and if it determined that the current practices are not suitable. But again, I come back to the point that this individual willfully and knowingly left an area where he should not have.
For breaking the law, the man is now facing a maximum sentence of 6 months in jail or a $4,000 fine. Air Commodore Webb says people in the facilities are all made to understand the requirements and expectations during their stay.
Fundamentally, these aren't prisons or corrections facilities, and as people return to New Zealand, they need to understand that the obligations are on them not to break the law. There will be consequences, and I can confirm that this individual will be charged and there will be consequences to these actions.
Health Minister Chris Hipkins says it was an act of selfishness.
It is completely unacceptable that we have now had 2 people let everybody else down by breaking the rules, leaving facilities and putting New Zealanders at risk. These are acts of selfishness that we intend to use the full weight of the law to stop.
The man is now in quarantine at the Jet Park Hotel and will be summoned to appear in court at a later date. For Checkpoint, Amy Williams.
It took 4 days for disgraced National MP Hamish Walker to come clean about leaking private information, but less than 24 hours for his career to come crashing down around him. The Clousa Southland MP announced shortly after midday that he won't seek re-election in September, a decision his leader described as his only option. The saga ramped up last night when Mr Walker confessed to the leak, with former National Party President Michelle Bogue admitting shortly after that she passed the details of COVID-19 patients on to the backbench MP. And it's still unclear where Ms Bogue got that information from in the first place. Our political reporter Jo Moyer has this story.
National Party leader Todd Muller's day started with a grilling about his under fire MP. And as he did his morning media rounds, the end to Hamish Walker's short-lived political career was already underway.
I wrote to the board last night expressing my concern over his behaviour, and I understand the board are meeting today.
Shortly after midday, Hamish Walker announced he wouldn't be contesting his Southland seat. Details of the leak came to light over the weekend when media outlets, including RNZ, revealed they'd received the private details of 18 COVID patients from an anonymous source. Mr Muller and several colleagues spent the weekend crying foul, calling the leak shabby and unacceptable. Little did Mr Muller know that his own MP was the leaker, and right-wing commentator and former National Party President Michelle Bogue had given him the information. When Hamish Walker confessed to Todd Muller at midday on Monday, he came armed with advice from Trevor Shields QC to make sure he was clear of criminal charges. That put the opposition leader on the back foot, who spent the next 24 hours responding to his MP's legal counsel.
When you receive a letter from a QC, that's what you do. And so that's what I did.
Todd Muller was in Ashburton this afternoon for policy announcements on roading, but it was Hamish Walker's resignation that was the focus of everyone's attention. He says his backbench MP's mistake cost him his career.
His judgment was fundamentally flawed, and I'm on record a number of times now confirming that, and he's paid the ultimate price of doing that.
Michelle Bogue's official involvement in the National Party has also come to an end. She resigned this morning from her campaign and electorate roles in the Auckland Central seat, held by National's Deputy Leader, Nikki Kay. For Ms Kay, who has known Ms Bogue for many years, it's come as a blow.
Absolutely gutted, hugely disappointed. It's a very terrible situation. She's obviously resigned from her position at Helicopter Trust, and I think it's appropriate that she has also given up her positions within the National Party.
Checkpoint sent off reporter Matthew Tunison to see if he could track down Ms Bogue at her home.
Hi, is that Michelle?
Yeah.
Hi, it's Matthew Tunison from RNZ. How are you doing?
good, but I'm not responding to any door stopping. So
Oh, really? Will you be able to talk to us a little later on?
no, I'm not talking to anyone, and I don't appreciate being door stopped, but it's not going to work.
While Ms Bogue resigned yesterday as acting chief executive of the Auckland Rescue Helicopter Trust, it was only today that she was removed as a trustee. The trust chair has revealed Ms Bogue has never had access to any clinical or patient data, which begs the question as to where she got the information from and whether there's another leak. Trust Chair Simon Tompkins says the details of COVID-19 patients are protected and only people who need it to care for patients can access it. Ms Bogue said on Tuesday night she received the information via a personal email address. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has weighed in, accusing Mr Walker of using the private information of New Zealanders as a political weapon.
What we have an example of here, though, is someone who has, for political reasons, used people's personal information as a weapon. That is never acceptable in New Zealand. In fact, my view is this is a wake-up call.
The inquiry into the leak, led by QC Michael Heron, will still go ahead. If nothing else, the government wants to be sure those who had the information received it appropriately. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
OK, we like to call this the role of refusals. Checkpoint tried to contact Hamish Walker. His phone was off and he didn't return our messages. Trevor Shields, QC, who was representing Mr Walker, said neither he nor his client would be commenting. The National Party president, Peter Goodfellow, didn't return messages. We did manage to reach National Party board member Alistair Bell, but he declined to be interviewed. Michelle Bogue, the former National Party president and the source of the COVID-19 patient information leak, while she refused to come on the program too. And National Party leader Todd Muller declined to be interviewed on Checkpoint. And to round things out, Rescue Helicopter Trust Chair Simon Tompkins didn't want to talk to us either. Now, that is the trust where Michelle Bogue was acting CEO before she resigned after confessing to the leak. Let's return now to our top story about the 32-year-old man who did a runner last night from managed isolation at Auckland's Stamford Plaza. He was supposed to be on a smoke break when he escaped through a fence. He eventually turned back up at the hotel and subsequently tested positive for COVID-19. Joining us now is the Minister in charge of managed isolation and quarantine, Megan Woods. Minister, this must make you want to scream, does it?
Look, it is hugely disappointing. We are asking those people that are coming home to make the necessary sacrifices to keep their fellow New Zealanders safe. This was an incredibly selfish act, that we all followed the rules and locked ourselves down for 5 weeks to get into this position that we're in now. We all made a sacrifice and we're asking those coming home to do the same. This man broke the law.
Understand that you can't, it's not a prison and you can't control every moment of these people's lives. But he escaped through a fence while he was on a smoke break at the Stamford, right? So the security guard saw this person but didn't stop him. Was that because they didn't have the power to stop him, or they didn't realise that he was someone in isolation?
So the reports that I've received is actually that there was some confusion created because actually we were changing out the fences at the Stamford, putting in higher fences to further secure areas after, we've had some incidents at other facilities that have been publicised in the last few days, so upping the security around these hotels. So there was some contractors in that were swapping out those fences. There were people around, and that he used the opportunity of there being people around and a gap in the fence to slip through.
If in doubt, though, shouldn't the security guard just simply have asked him when he was wandering off, hey, are you supposed to be in isolation? Is there a lack of experience with some of the people that you've got on the ground at these hotels?
So, look, AVSEC were alerted and followed up very quickly, went to check that he was there. So there was, and then tried to pursue him, but he was too far ahead to get him. So I think what we're seeing is that there was a quick response. People realised within minutes.
Not fast enough, though,
gone.
Minister. Not fast enough, though, because he's gone for a while.
I absolutely
so
agree.
can you just clarify, the security guards there, do they have the legal right to stop someone leaving isolation? Can they physically stop them?
They're not police. They can't arrest and detain. They can do the things that you see security guards at a range of places that do. You see them at sports events, you see them at bars.
Yep. So does that mean you need police? Do you need police or someone who does have that power to be on guard, not these security guards?
And look, we've been working through that this afternoon about what we need to do. I have to say that things have changed even in the last week and a half in terms of the range of incidents that we're seeing in terms of non-compliance. The beginning, we had a very compliant population who came in who absolutely understood their responsibilities to their fellow New Zealanders. And we didn't have people attempting to climb fences or slip through gaps when they saw an opportunity. But we are continuing to look at that. Air Commodore Webb and I have been in discussions
What do you think's changed, Minister? Sorry to interrupt. So if they are going rogue and they're acting out, what's changed? Why aren't they feeling like they are obligated to do this for the team?
Well, I mean, I don't have insight into each and every individual in those facilities. One thing I would observe is they're probably looking out their windows and they're seeing a level 1 world operating, and they're living in level 4, which is quite different.
So do you need to get them out of the city? You need to get them out of the city then, do you?
Oh, look, in an ideal world you would, but the other thing that you've got to be close to is to make sure that you're close to the medical personnel that you need in order to staff it, the testing facilities, the ability to do that quickly. This is complex. Believe me, if we could put them out in the back of the never, where there aren't other people around, and we could do that safely and fulfil the health criteria that we have to have for our facilities, it would certainly make our lives a lot easier. But it is the complex layer of requirements that we need around these facilities that inevitably is leading to these big hotels, and they tend to be in CBDs.
OK, I know this would be unfortunate for the people who are complying with the rules, but why not just give them all nicotine patches and say, sorry, you can't go outside to smoke, that's it. People are not behaving, so stay inside.
And look, the smoking policy is being reviewed.
So what does that mean? You are going to stop them from going outside for smoke breaks?
Look, the team's having a look at the smoking policy and what that might be. Air Commodore Webb today talked about times that the areas might not be available for people to use and things like that. But look, we're going to have more to say on that tomorrow, that we're doing a rapid review of those policies. Do you need to, and this sounds slightly strange, but do you need to tag them in some way? I know you can't put electronic bracelets on everybody, but should they have to wear an identifying band so that people guarding or standing on security know exactly who the isolation people are? And look, these are all things that we're looking at, what technology might be able to be used inside the facilities. We've actually had that piece of work underway for, feels like an age, but it's probably only about a week and a half, had that piece work underway to see. You know, we've funded quite a lot of...
So you're not rolling that
technology.
Out? Some kind of tagging?
Well, I mean, the ways in which, apps on their phones or other ways in which you can trace people's movements. We're looking at a range of options to make sure that we are providing the strongest line of defence to defend New Zealanders. We're asking people who are in there to do their bit, to take their responsibility.
Understand that, but some of them aren't they? So this guy was wobbling around for 70 minutes. How long was he in the supermarket?
So it seems to be, the timeline that I have been given is that he exited the Stamford at 6:50 and he arrived at the Countdown in Victoria West at 7:02 and left there at 7:22. What has been happening this afternoon is a range of CCTV footage has been used from around the area to track his movements, as well as, of course, he's been questioned by police.
Okay, so what do you know? What do you know from the information given to you where he spent the rest of the time?
I don't have that information yet. That is information that has been gathered this afternoon through both questioning of the individual.
We're almost 24 hours on, though, Minister, and this is critical information, isn't it? Who's he been talking to? Who's he been standing next to? Who's he been breathing on?
And all that work has been carried out, Lisa, and I want to give people that assurance. That the CCTV footage that the team has been working with Countdown just to track his movements through the supermarket. We know that he used a self-service lane when he was at the supermarket, and just ascertaining what kind of contact tracing needs to be undertaken as a result of him being in the supermarket.
But that's only 34 minutes of his time, isn't it? It's only 34 minutes of his time, Minister. He's gone for an hour and 10. The missing gap. You must have some clues at this stage.
No, what I'm saying is that work has been carried out through questioning of him and CCTV footage. That has not been reported to me at this stage. It will be when that piece of work is complete. But please be assured that is work that has been carried out at pace. It simply hasn't been reported up to the Minister yet, because it's much more important that operationally we're gathering all that intelligence so we can get on with contact tracing that needs to occur because of it.
Okay.
I will receive a report on that, I would say later tonight or tomorrow morning.
So this goes to court, right? He's going to be charged. What about instant fines? Is it time for you to step up the punishment here, like in Australia? 10 grand instant fine. That would make some people sit up and pay attention.
So we do have a fining system within our Act as well. So there is 6 months imprisonment or a $4,000 fine. So there is a range of measures that can
How
be
many
taken.
of those fines have been issued?
Look, I don't know that any have to date.
Isn't that the point?
To decide. That is a police matter about whether or not someone is charged, and is a question that needs to be put to them. Certainly it is my expectation that people that are breaking the law and putting New Zealanders at risk are dealt with appropriately. There are consequences that are in the law, and I'd like to see them applied.
So you're replacing fences at all facilities to make them, 6 foot? So who pays for that and how much is it costing?
I've asked how much it's going to cost. I'm going to be receiving those figures. Obviously, there's a cost to it, and this is a cost that the taxpayers are picking up. We were once in a scenario where we didn't have to put 6-foot fences around, that people understood their obligations, and they weren't scale fences or slip between cracks in fences to escape. This does come at a cost, but fundamentally, our responsibility as a government is to make sure that our managed isolation facilities are that strong line of defence that have kept us without community transmission.
We're out of time, Minister. Can I get a quick answer? Queenstown, is it still a contender for isolation?
We're still considering it. We have to see whether or not we've got the ability to have the health workforce that is required there. I'll be visiting there next week.
Understand that. Thank you so much for joining us. That is the Minister who's responsible for managed isolation and quarantine, Megan Woods. It is 27 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback. Let us know what you think about that. So the guy does a runner from the Stamford Plaza. He's gone for an hour and 10 minutes. It is a matter that is going to go to court. I mean, how do we stop these people? It isn't a prison, as the Minister says. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let us know your thoughts on Hamish Walker announcing he's not standing at the next election either. Small businesses in the tourist town of Waitomo are crying foul over big government handouts being passed on to larger operators while they struggle to survive. Discover Waitomo, one of the town's biggest operators, has received $4 million in government help to get it through the coming months. But they're not the only ones doing it tough, and smaller players say they need help with funds too. Reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe went to see how Waitomo's businesses are faring.
Just months ago, Discover Waitomo's homestead would have been full of international visitors tucking into their lunch after a trip through the settlement's famed glowworm caves. Today, the building's dining area is deserted. Instead of hot meals, chairs sit on each table. The hum of languages from across the globe is replaced with silence.
This is just the reality of what we're facing at the moment. Short term, hopefully, in a couple of years' time, in a year's time, we'll be back up in business and this will be full again with our international visitors, all going well.
That's Discover Waitomo commercial manager Christine Manns. She says the company owned by publicly listed Tourism Holdings Limited has effectively gone from a large-scale operator to a small-time outfit still handling massive overheads. The domestic market it now relies on represents just 14% of its business. Manns says that figure has lifted slightly thanks to the school holidays.
Luckily to the school holidays, we're now what I see as a medium tourism operator. But after the school holidays, we'll be back to a small-scale operator.
Discover Waitomo has limited its operations to 4 days a week, though it's back up to 7 days through the school holidays. Meanwhile, Tourism Holdings Limited has slashed up to 140 jobs, many of those losses coming at Discover Waitomo and the rest through Kiwi Experience bus tours. Still, the company is soldiering on with a shot in the arm in the form of $4 million through the government's strategic tourism asset funding.
I think the key thing for us being operational is to acknowledge the grant that we got from the government. Large-scale business, large overhead, so therefore that grant enabled us to stay open, and that also enables other operators to stay open, and for visitors who are coming to see us, when we go to the caves, I'll show you that they can come and eat in the local cafes, that they can choose between us and other operators as well. So we are generating a local economy by being open.
But not all the locals are happy. Peter Chandler owns Spellbound, Glowworm and Cave Tours.
The majority of people we spoke to when that was news thought that the money had been given to all the Waitomo operators, which wasn't actually true. So it did seem strange that the big operator got all the funding, but yet they were actually only open 4 days a week until this week, and the other operators made a commitment for the public to be open 7 days a week. So it did feel kind of weird.
Chandler says small operators want a piece of the pie too.
Probably because of that, a lot of the smaller operators have actually said, hey, we're important too. We're actually we're showcasing New Zealand. So we've actually put in for that funding as well to a lesser degree.
Chandler says the school holidays have been a busier time for his business, but the road in the lead-up has been tough.
It's been quiet, but there has been a steady trickle of Kiwis going through Waitomo. I think we're quite well placed with the large Auckland population. We actually stayed open the month of June. We normally have our recess, our winter break in June, so that's how much of a crazy year it's been. And we all knew it was going to get busier in the school holidays, and yeah, it certainly has really picked up. We had a lot of forward bookings for the school holidays, so yeah, you can't complain really.
Meanwhile, Mann says Discover Waitomo's new 4-day-a-week model has taken some getting used to.
In tourism, you look at the bell curve from a cyclical perspective, and you have your peak season, which is your summer, then your off peaks, and then your sort of winter months. So what we find is actually our Saturday is our peak season, our summer month. Sundays are pretty much going into spring or autumn, and then Thursday and Friday are our winter months. So we've kind of got 4 seasons in 1 week.
A smattering of domestic tourists had made the trip to the rural Waikato village when Checkpoint visited on Wednesday, though the settlement's car parks and cafes were far from capacity. Some, like Hamilton's Cheryl Robertson, who decided to take her grandchildren on their first cave tour, are taking advantage of the campervan and cave tour deals on offer.
We thought it would be quietish, but then we wondered as well, if there would be a lot of locals, just domestic travellers out and about, especially being school holidays. But so far it's quiet, but then it is wet and, not the nicest out there today anyway.
Bad weather or not, the message from locals is clear.
I mean, you don't have to come this week. Waitomo is actually a lot nicer in the summertime, but if you have to get out of Auckland, if you really need to get out of Auckland, come down now, or we'll be very happy to see you this coming summer.
So despite some very dark times for Waitomo, business owners here remain hopeful there's light at the end of the tunnel. For Checkpoint, Nick Trubridge.
OK, just an update on the weather situation. More than 20,000 households just north of Auckland are without power this evening as strong winds buffet the area. Transpower says bad weather's caused outages for Vector and North Power customers in Warkworth and North, including Wellsford, Kaiwaka, Mongataroto, Ruawai and across to Mangawhai. Crews are working to bring everyone back online, and some power has already been restored to Wellsford. Transpower says it's hopeful the issue will be resolved within the next hour. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the final countdown for Melbourne as millions prepare to go into lockdown for 6 weeks. The government pours cash into upgrading our drinking, storm and wastewater systems. And hello, winter. A cold blast brings much needed snow to ski fields. We'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Get in touch. What do you make of Hamish Walker's? Well, I suppose it's essentially his resignation from politics, and also the runner we had from the Stamford Plaza, a guy who was supposed to be in isolation. And went walkabout for an hour and 10 minutes. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. We're a little late, so sorry, but it's headlines time now with Susanna.
The Minister in charge of managed isolation and quarantine told Checkpoint officials are trawling through CCTV footage to trace the steps of a man who escaped managed isolation last night. Megan Woods says everyone has made sacrifices during the pandemic and she's asking those returning home to do the same. The man left the Stamford Plaza Hotel to shop in Countdown Supermarket on Victoria Street West, returning 70 minutes later. His positive COVID-19 result came back today. The man will be charged and faces a maximum of 6 months in prison or a $4,000 fine. Nationals leader has apologised for one of his MPs leaking the private details of 18 COVID-19 patients. Todd Muller, however, pushed back against questions that it showed he didn't have control of his team, saying it's an isolated incident and as leader he acted swiftly. The Australian Prime Minister says a travel bubble with New Zealand will not happen for some time and that his focus is on the latest COVID-19 outbreak in Victoria. Melbourne is preparing to enter a 6-week lockdown from tonight and the New South Wales government is considering further restrictions that would isolate people on its border with Victoria, which closed this morning. Met Service is forecasting snow showers will turn heavier on the central plateau of the North Island tonight. Its duty forecaster Lewis Ferris says road conditions are likely to be treacherous. About 25,000 homes north of Auckland have lost power this afternoon because of the bad weather. Transpower says it's still investigating the cause of the fault, but one of the 2 circuits that tripped has been restored and people should have their power back on by 6 this evening. A New Zealander in Melbourne says he's losing sleep over the uncertainty about when he can return home. Emirates and Air New Zealand have frozen all new bookings for 3 weeks to help the government control the flow into managed isolation facilities. Roger Frizzle says he will have to stay with friends now after giving notice at his flat. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Nona Peltier's joined me in the studio for the business news. Nona, so dairy overnight global dairy auction, a sharp rise in prices. Well, was that expected?
No, it wasn't. In fact, it's it's true. It wasn't. It's the 4th consecutive rise, and this last one was a whopper. It went up 8.3% overall average, but the more important price, which is the milk powder price, which we track because that's what the farm gate milk prices are based on, rose 14%, which is no one was expecting that, to $3,008 a ton. So
what's driving it?
Well, no one really knows. I guess, could it be international hoarding? Who knows? I have no one really knows because it wasn't what analysts were picking at all. In fact, they're saying, well, it's probably not sustainable because there's no driver behind it. And not only that, there's competing products in the world which are likely to come up. So, perhaps farmers can have a bit of a smile on their face today, but it might not last since there's no real reason behind this drive. So that's quite interesting. It's a mysterious
maybe
increase.
Another thing attributable to COVID-19. It's like stockpiling loo paper. They've moved to...
move on to milk powder.
Move on to milk powder. Who knows? Okay. Me Today. Okay, well, a couple of questions with this. First off, what is Me Today? You say that they're raising money for global expansion and product development. What do they do?
An interesting company. So it's a new company that was launched onto the NZX through a reverse backdoor listing. So it went through a company that was there. It was like a shell company. They bought the shares in it, got shareholder approval, and launched this new company called Me Today. And what they do is, what they're going to be doing is manufacturing a range of skincare products and natural supplements, look good, feel good, that kind of idea. And think that they're going to have a fabulous market. And the reason they do think that they're going to make a lot of money is because these are the same folks who have run all sorts of other successful businesses. For example, Trilogy, which was sold for a pretty penny. The other company that these guys are associated with is that vodka company 42 Below.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So they're kind of serial entrepreneurs, and this is their new venture. It launched, though, just as we went into lockdown. So they've raised some money. They're going to be raising $4.5 million through an issue of shares. And pretty excited for their options. I think they decided that there's a huge market out there and they're expert marketers. They're pretty confident they can get a good share of that.
And what has been happening on the markets today? Given the recent run, I wait with bated breath.
Well, you wouldn't be wrong. It was an increase over some time, but look, we had to have some kind of a pause. So we're down nearly 0.33% today. That's a 36-point drop to 11,707. It's still a really big toppy number, and it was also in line with what we saw in Asia. I was looking at what the Reuters reporters were writing there. They said Asian stocks dithered. That's probably a good word for it. Anyway, the New Zealand dollar is steady at 65.5 US cents, 94.3 and 52.1 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with your business news this afternoon. The New South Wales Premier has signalled she may lock down towns on the Victorian border if people don't follow the strict border closure rules that came in last night. And at midnight tonight, the whole of metropolitan Victoria, about 5 million people, will go into a 6-week lockdown. But they can leave home to exercise, visit essential shops and to go to work. There's no parties, with police threatening big fines, and certainly no invitations across the border, with South Australia following suit and shutting its doors to Victorians as well. Alex Perrottet has the latest.
Priest Father Joseph Martins was teaching a theology course in the Victorian country town of Castlemaine when he got the news that metropolitan Melbourne was about to be ring-fenced. So he jumped online to book a flight and got out.
There was a lady there as we queued up to go through the security to check to see are you a resident. I had to show my license. And she said, look, you may have to prove, if you weren't in the city, you might have to prove that, where you were. But fortunately, when I got to Sydney, I had to fill out a form, and I told them I'd been in Castlemaine, and they sort of took my word for it. And I gave them the address where I'd been and everything.
He says he wasn't keen to spend the next 2 weeks self-isolating at home. But for the 5 million others he left behind in Greater Melbourne, that's exactly what's on the cards for the next 6 weeks. Melbourne lawyer Louis Supan isn't happy.
To be honest, I was pissed off. Annoyed that we were going back to this. It was a massive bungle with the hotel quarantines, right? And that's where my understanding is that's how it spread it. How could that have happened? Why weren't these security guys trained, or, why weren't the police or the army patrolling the hotels?
After the devastating lapse, the state's authorities have swung back into action as COVID-19 cases mount. Today was the second worst day yet, with 134 new cases, including 75 in the strictly locked down public housing towers. One case was a doctor at St Vincent's Hospital, which prompted 15 other staff to go into quarantine. This morning, the Premier Dan Andrews reported 1 million tests had now been carried out this year, and he says there's no escaping the reality of the situation.
This is not the situation that anybody wanted to be in, but it is the reality that we must confront. To do otherwise is to pretend that this isn't real.
The Premier also lamented the economic outlook after the Federal Treasurer warned that the new lockdown could cost up to $1 billion a week. And if those wallet woes aren't threatening enough, Victoria's Police Minister Lisa Neville says fines will be dealt out for breaches.
Police will be there, whether you're breaking your quarantine at home, whether you're having parties, whether you're having people over to your place, or whether it's about you trying to, for no good reason, go to regional Victoria, police will be there.
And behind those lines are more police, hundreds from New South Wales swarming around the border towns and the more remote crossings after the state border was shut at midnight. The Police Commissioner Mick Fuller was apprehensive about how locals in Albury and Wodonga would react this morning.
We know that at some of the points there were 3 to 4 kilometre queues, but the community that we were dealing with from a police perspective were very understanding. Some vehicles have been turned around, sent back to Victoria because the drivers came from postcodes that are of threat from the virus. But outside of that, the permit system is working.
James Stewart lives in Albury, but he works in Wodonga and says the closure is a pain no matter how good the system might be.
There is the sentiment, I think, that this is a Melbourne problem and Albury Wodonga is probably being punished the most as far as inconvenience for people.
He was up last night applying for a permit online. He says he was issued with a 2-week permit only, and to avoid this morning's chaos, he chose to work from home today. But he says he supports Mayor Kevin Mack's view that the border should be moved just north of Albury, which he says would save a lot of headaches.
I think a bit of local knowledge would have been handy there, and that, Albury-Wodonga are effectively a twin city. So there is a lot of people who work, and, even where my kids go to school, there are people that from Wodonga side, their kids come across the border to our school, and people, cross every day just for those everyday activities.
And this afternoon, New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian warned that extra border could still happen.
I'm putting everybody on notice that you have to respect what we've asked you to do.
She made it clear that those people in border towns are effectively in lockdown.
If you're an Albury resident mixing with Wodongans and there's someone in Wodonga who's impacted and then you travel to Sydney, the rate of seeding and infection is extremely high, which is why I've said if you live in a border community, do not move outside your border community.
After coming out of its own lockdown, Gladys Berejiklian is fiercely protecting her state, dishing out this warning to bars and cafes.
Basic things like sharing a salt and pepper shaker, for example, and I get to that level of detail, but basic things like that are a health risk.
For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
And those fears held by the New South Wales Premier seem well founded, with news just to hand that a plane load of Jetstar passengers from Melbourne arriving in Sydney last night were allowed to leave the airport without screening. It seems health workers were busy attending to another airline. And the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has once again downplayed the likelihood of a travel bubble with New Zealand anytime soon. As Melbourne prepares to go into lockdown, he says stopping the outbreak in Victoria is the country's main priority.
We haven't even concluded any arrangements with any other countries at the moment, and it'll be some time yet before we even were able to achieve that, even for New Zealand or potentially any countries in the Pacific. I'm not here to tell people what I'm thinking about. I'm here to tell people what we're doing, and the government has focused on dealing with what's happening right now in Australia.
Scott Morrison also said officials are considering limiting the number of Australian citizens and residents able to return home from overseas.
The fact is that New South Wales has been bearing the largest burden of people returning to Australia, and they're Queenslanders, they're Western Australians, they're Tasmanians, and New South Wales has done the heavy lifting on that and foot the bill for it too, I should say. And I thought that was one of another good example of how the National Cabinet was working. No one was squabbling about money, about who was going to pick up the bill for quarantine. Now in Victoria we've suspended those flights coming in, and that has meant that people have moved on to other flights going into other capitals, and we've looked at that, and as I said, I'll be taking a proposal to National Cabinet to slow that down as of this Friday.
Seeking to reassure people outside of Victoria, Scott Morrison said there are no immediate plans to reimpose restrictions in other parts of the country. Back home, the government is pouring money into upgrading the country's drinking and storm and wastewater systems. An investment of $761 million was announced in Havelock North today. But councils will have to sign up to wider reforms to get the cash. Here's our Hawke's Bay reporter, Tom Kitchen.
4 years ago, the town of Havelock North was brought to a standstill by an illness that left 4 people dead, 5,000 sick, and some with permanent disabilities. Investigations found the cause was Campylobacter in the drinking water. Standing near the source of the water contaminated during that outbreak, the Prime Minister said at least 34,000 people became ill each year from drinking tap water.
Everyone in New Zealand agrees that that is unacceptable in a developed nation like ours for us to have drinking water at that standard.
And Jacinda Ardern says a significant amount of money is needed to change that.
There is a significant infrastructure deficit when it comes to our drinking water and wastewater. This first tranche will be divided based on population base but also area. So that's dependent though, of course, on which areas of the country, which local government members wish to come on board and be part of this program of reform.
Hastings District Councillor Baden Barrett remembers the grim reality of the Campylobacter crisis. Now he says it feels like officials have understood something has to change, so it won't happen anywhere else.
Lessons learned. Things that come out of disasters like that, we have to learn lessons. So
we've learned a lesson at the Hastings Council, and the government has come on board and saying that we need to support local government to upgrade and ensure that it doesn't happen in any council in any part of New Zealand. So, I think that's probably the main thing.
But there is a catch. To get the money, councils have to sign up to the government's wider water reform program. That program is developing a multi-regional model for water service delivery, taking away the full control that councils now have. But local government minister Nanai Mahuta isn't bothered. She thinks it will have wide appeal.
We're certainly promoting the coalition of the willing, but as I say, we're here at Havelock because we recognise the leadership in an area where there were some very challenging circumstances, but the leadership across this region leaned in and said we've got to do things differently. Now, I think that that's probably the appetite for change across the sector.
Water New Zealand's President Calvin Hill says the funding addresses a desperate need.
This will go quite a way to helping that cause in the right direction, especially for a lot of councils that may be struggling with the whole issue around funding.
A new drinking water regulator, Taumata Arawai, will enforce the standards. The government's made the offer. Now it's up for councils to decide if they want to be part of the new system or not. Mo te hōtaka o te aiahi nei, ko Tom Kitchener-Ho.
It is 10 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A lot of you getting in touch about isolation and managed quarantine and about whether we need to toughen up there. Keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The US has shattered the single-day record for new COVID-19 cases with more than 58,000. Most health officials agree it's a public health disaster. In the past week and a half, the US has roughly doubled its total cases to about 3 million. CNN's Nick Watt has more.
Big Tex taking a break for the first time since World War II. The Texas State Fair just cancelled as the military sends medical personnel to San Antonio to help.
The 4 days leading up to the 4th of July combined were the 4 deadliest days that we've had. My concern is that we may see greater fatalities going forward.
In Florida, ICUs in 43 hospitals are now full.
Especially we need to look at our younger population that we know had a tremendous spike in their positivity rate, which in turn has infected other people.
Florida still won't reveal how many COVID-19 patients they have in hospitals, despite the governor's claims today.
All the data that goes into this is all available.
Spreadsheet from that data, Governor, it is not available.
But Miami-Dade County does release COVID-19 hospital numbers, and they're up 90% in just 2 weeks. Still, the state just issued an order for schools to reopen next month. There's pushback.
We can't go on this path of putting our teachers in this petri dish of danger.
I will not reopen our school system August 24th if the conditions are what they are today.
In California, the state's capital now closed indefinitely after at least 5 lawmakers tested positive. Test lines are getting longer.
All of this just makes it so much harder to manage this disease.
Quest Diagnostics says last month results were taking 2 to 3 days. Now it's 4 to 6. Quick results are key in effectively isolating the infected.
The cases are rising so rapidly that we cannot even do contact tracing anymore.
Undiagnosed silent spreaders might be responsible for around half of all cases, according to one new study. And as cases climb, nearly half of states now slowing or rolling back reopening.
Nick Watt reporting from the US there. Winter has ramped up a gear as temperatures plummeted across the country today. While the southerly blast has been tough on drivers and farmers, it's been welcomed by skiers just in time for the school holidays. Ruth Hill reports.
When it comes to snow business, it's possible to have too much of a good thing. At Codrona Ski Field near Wanaka, the cafe was doing a brisk trade in hot chocolate and mulled wine today. Snowfield manager Ewan Mackey says there's been lovely snow today. You just couldn't see much of it due to the near zero visibility.
Well, of course, that's always the challenge, isn't it? You know, if we didn't have storm days, we wouldn't have any snow to ski on. So but of course, we'd all much prefer to be skiing in blue sky and sunshine. So, you know, it's the combo, and unfortunately, sometimes we get storm days, and ideally, you get snow overnight or snow for just a portion of the day, and it clears up. But we did have a bit of sunshine first thing in the morning, but apart from that, we've been socked in a full-on polar blast southerly today.
According to Met Service, snow fell as low as 300 metres around Queenstown and surrounding districts today. At Coronet Peak, several drivers needed to be towed or get help with putting chains on their tyres after losing traction on the icy road with sheer drops on one side. Snowfield manager Nigel Kerr says about 3,000 skiers hit the slopes today, which would be on a par with a non-COVID season.
An awful lot of locals decided they would go skiing, but they kind of told us by coming with their feet. So yeah, it's been very busy, very steady, really, really good snow, probably the pick of the season today. Dry winter snow, top to bottom, probably about 30 centimetres, off-piste of powder. We've just had a lot of people having a good time.
Drivers who braved the Crown Ranges between Wanaka and Queenstown earlier today reported slightly chaotic scenes, with some struggling in the slippery conditions. Queenstown Lakes District Council spokesman Campbell Wheel says the road was gritted and ploughed, and while there's still a snow warning in place, the powder isn't settling.
People down here, either whether they're from here or whether they've moved here, learn pretty quickly to have that set of chains and chuck them in their car. And then there's also those tricky little things like having a kind of a yoga mat or something as well in your car so you can kneel on it when you have to put your chains on your vehicle, because you don't want to turn up to work with like mud and sleet all down your pants putting chains on.
Otago Federated Farmers President Simon Davies says it's been a mild winter until now and the change has been sudden, but farmers are always prepared.
It's an inconvenience, it's a bit unpleasant, but most farmers should have been prepared for it. It was certainly forecast for that, and so they will have planned accordingly.
In the North Island, there's a snowfall warning for Remataka Hill north of Wellington, with up to 2 centimetres of snow expected to settle on the summit overnight. And on the Central Plateau, snow showers are expected to turn heavier, with up to 10 centimetres of snow expected on State Highway 1, the Desert Road, and up to 1 centimetre on the Napier Taupo Road this evening. Ruapehu Alpine Lift's Chief Executive John O'Dean says it's good timing for the school holidays.
Look, it's a good start. Unfortunately, what we've seen in 2020 is our snow's been relatively late in the central North Island, but this is certainly promising weather pattern for us, which we're really excited about, but we do still need a little bit more.
Met Service is forecasting a spell of more settled weather for most of the country over the next couple of days, before more rain arrives on the weekend. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
And let's get to some of your feedback now, and a lot of it coming in on managed isolation and quarantine. This is about the man in his 30s who was supposed to be in isolation at the Stamford Plaza in Auckland, but last night, while on a smoke break, he skipped out of isolation and went walkabout, going to a Countdown supermarket. He was in there for approximately 20 minutes, but he was gone for an hour and 10 minutes, and the whereabouts for the rest of that time is currently under investigation. The Minister has told us he's being interviewed and they're going through CCTV footage to find out exactly who's been in contact with him. We should say he subsequently tested positive for COVID-19. Right, so some of your feedback. This listener says, time to get tougher in managed isolation, no more smoke breaks, confinement to the room. Another one here, New Zealand cannot afford these COVID breaches. The government needs to stop repatriating people now. And in the same vein, it's totally slack, this listener says. Honestly, people, please lock returnees in and stop all incoming now, in capital letters. Make an example of his actions, says another person in prison. Well, he's going to be charged, the outcome of which is still pending, obviously. The runaway COVID guy, hang on, this person said. Should we be blaming the army or whoever it was supposed to be patrolling the hotel? And the minister says the security guard did notice him but thought he was a fencing contractor, but did raise the alarm after he wandered off. And Kevin from Dunedin says, why not charter a cruise ship for quarantine purposes? Now, this is interesting because if we're on a boat, there's not far for you to go. You can't get off. Kevin says there are a few around, not doing a lot right now. Berth it at the wharf in Auckland and it would be real easy to maintain security and address the capacity issues. Good point, Kevin. This person says whatever the government does, they are criticised for it. It's not a prison. Imagine the uproar if people in isolation were tagged while the minister says they're looking at some kind of electronic tracking. And people throw up their hands at the idea of scanning the QR code. How are the PC crowd going to react if isolation people can't smoke? That's under consideration as well, the minister said. There is no rule book. Should the security guard have risked his own health and that of his family? It's up to each of these people to follow the rules. And someone else says it's an easy fix, Lisa. If they breach the terms of isolation, they should be required to pay the full costs of the stay. That's an interesting thought. Around $4,000 is what they think that is on average for 2 weeks. And they should also pay for the legal proceedings, this listener says. That would be a significant incentive to obey the rules. Tensum Waiuru, reckons Tim. Might make them think again. It's what they deserve. Andy from Northland says the guy who escaped his hotel should be deported, full stop. The sacrifices we, the team of 5 million, made and succeeded in doing is too valuable to be squandered by a trip to Countdown. It's beyond comprehension, never mind reason. The person does not deserve to be in this beautiful, wholesome country. Prison or deportation is what Andy reckons. And Annika says, I cannot believe the ignorance of the people who decided to go walkabout. Anyone coming or going out of a facility should have to sign in and out. It's not hard, she says.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. Officials are trawling through CCTV footage to find out exactly where a COVID-19 patient went after escaping managed isolation and who he had contact with. The 32-year-old man escaped through a fence last night at the Stanford Plaza Hotel in Auckland. He was tested yesterday before his escape and the positive result came back today. The Minister in charge, Megan Woods, has told Checkpoint they're still working to find out where he spent the 70 minutes he was missing.
The timeline that I have been given is that he exited the Stanford at 6:50 and he arrived at the Countdown in Victoria West at 7:02 and left there at 7:22. What has been happening this afternoon is a range of CCTV footage has been used from around the area to track his movements, as well as, of course, he's been questioned by police.
Megan Woods says they're working quickly to find out what contact tracing measures need to be in place. The State Services Minister Chris Hipkins says it's up to an independent inquiry to determine how Michelle Bogue had access to the private details of COVID-19 patients. The former National Party president last night confessed to passing the information to National MP Hamish Walker, who then leaked it to media. Ms Bogue says she was privy to the private information as the Auckland Rescue Helicopter Trust's acting chief executive, but the organisation says that's not true. The trust is confident the information was not leaked from within the organisation. Mr Hipkins says there are many unanswered questions a State Services inquiry will try to answer.
I don't think the government should rely on what comments people make to the media to draw a line under it. We actually want to have a proper, thorough investigation so that all of the facts can be put on the table so that everyone can be clear what happened.
Chris Hipkins. Voters in Mr Walker's Clutha Southland electorate are disappointed and shocked he's behind the leak. He won close to 60% of MP votes in the last election. Mr Walker announced he wouldn't contest his seat at the election earlier today. Queenstown local Anne says he's made the right decision. She says a lot of people are questioning his values after the leak. A New Zealander in Melbourne says he's losing sleep over the uncertainty about when he can return home. Roger Frizzle says his hopes of getting back have been dashed by a halt on most incoming international flights. Emirates and Air New Zealand have frozen all new bookings for 3 weeks after a government request. Roger Frizzle didn't have a flight booked but had already given notice at his Melbourne flat, so he says he will have to stay with friends. A leaked email has revealed health officials failed to screen travellers arriving at Sydney Airport on the last flight from Melbourne. It's a major breach of the state's coronavirus protocols. The ABC's Mark Reddy reports.
JQ520 was the last Melbourne flight to touch down at Sydney Airport before New South Wales closed its borders at midnight. Last week, Health Minister Brad Hazzard said all passengers arriving from Victoria must undergo screening to ensure none are from coronavirus hotspots. But that didn't happen, according to an internal email from Sydney Airport obtained by the ABC. It says Jetstar staff allowed disembarkation without New South Wales Health and Police in attendance, breaching screening protocols. Jetstar says procedures have since been reviewed.
Mark Reedy reporting there. The Prime Minister says councils which want a share of the $176 million COVID-19 stimulus package announced today will have to commit to the government's wider water reform program. Speaking beside a Havelock North water bore that was the source of a fatal Campylobacter outbreak in 2016, Jacinda Ardern said many councils are facing huge infrastructure costs, but COVID-19 has put them under even more financial pressure.
While the immediate intention is to stimulate the COVID-19 recovery, we also are expecting, of course, that we're getting that extra added benefit of upgrading much needed infrastructure.
Jacinda Ardern says a new drinking water regulator, Taumata Arowai, will enforce standards. It's coming up to 4.5 minutes past 6. The West Indies skipper Jason Holder has no interest in personal battles ahead of the first cricket test against England, despite it being billed as a clash between the world's best two all-rounders. Holder's hoping to become the first West Indies captain to win a series in England since Viv Richards in 1988, when the first test begins in Southampton tonight. Holder is top of the all-rounder world rankings with Ben Stokes, who'll skipper England for the first time in second spot. There'll be no hometown support for England, with spectators banned because of the pandemic. Despite that, Stokes still believes they'll still have an advantage.
You know, when you've got the 3 lions on your chest, you can't feel any more prouder in, given the sport that we play. I know there's not going to be anybody in the crowd to hear or get that energy from, but, we know we've got hundreds of thousands of people watching us from around England who want to see us do well.
Ben Stokes. Chelsea have climbed to third in the English Premiership and moved towards securing a European Champions League spot after a 3-2 win over Crystal Palace. Chelsea leapfrogged Leicester, who were held to a 1-1 draw with Arsenal, while Watford beat bottom-placed Norwich 2-1. Meanwhile, New Zealand football has received $900,000 from the government sport recovery package. It will go towards national men's and women's football and futsal competitions. And ESPN is reporting this year's Ryder Cup golf tournament has been postponed to 2021, and next year's President's Cup moved back by a year due to the coronavirus pandemic. That's the news.
I'm Catherine Ryan. On 9 to noon tomorrow, why advocates say it should be law for all new builds to be built as passive homes, particularly social housing, greatly improving quality of life. The artificial intelligence project that allows real-time video conversations with Holocaust survivors, reducing stress and managing expectations around getting decent sleep and pregnancy. And Tamar Munch reviews I'll Be Gone in the Dark, streaming on Neon. Join me on 9 to noon on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northlands to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Showers, possible squally thunderstorms tonight. Showers clearing south of Hamilton tonight also, and elsewhere tomorrow. Westerly gales for Northland through to Waitomo and Western Bay of Plenty, easing this evening. For the remainder of the North Island, rain with snow lowering to about 600 metres, easing to a few showers tonight. Showers becoming confined to Wairarapa, eastern Wellington and Taihape tomorrow, with snow to 400 metres for a time. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland increasing fine spells. Canterbury, a few showers mainly about the coast and Banks Peninsula, with snow lowering to 300 metres about Banks Peninsula this evening. Showers clearing tomorrow afternoon. For Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers with snow to 300 metres until this evening. Showers clearing about North and Central Otago and Dunedin tomorrow. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, showers tomorrow. RNZ National. It's 7.5 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's return now to our top story about the 32-year-old man who did a runner last night from managed isolation at Auckland's Stamford Plaza and then tested positive for COVID-19. Now, the man was supposed to be on a smoke break when he escaped through a fence. Security initially thought he was a contractor, but they did raise the alarm when they realised he was supposed to be in isolation. They tried to follow him, but they lost the trail. Turns out the man headed to a central city countdown supermarket. He eventually turned back up at the hotel, but that was an hour and 10 minutes later. Authorities are now searching through CCTV footage to work out exactly where he went and who he might have had contact with. The countdown branch was closed today as a precaution. Kitty Hannafin is the spokesperson for the supermarket chain, and she joins me now. Kitty, I know the risk is low, but it must be a bit of a worry for your staff.
Yeah, I think we just all got a bit of a fright after, having done so well for so long, I guess, being brought home to such close reality. So, yeah, the risk is very low, but we thought we'd give our team a day off and give them some support and then, give the store a good clean and we'll open again tomorrow.
Okay, so how many staff? And obviously the store's been shut for a day, so it's not an insignificant convenience, is it?
No, it's not. No, it isn't insignificant. I guess, there's obviously, we haven't traded all day, but mostly it's sort of an emotional toll for our team. We had 12 team on the floor last night when this guy was in our store, but we also had 6 nightfall team who were also going to ask to self-isolate. So 18 team impacted altogether.
And are they being offered tests, Kitty?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're asking them to take a test on Friday, so that gives it a few days, and then see how that goes, and hopefully we'll have them back at work over the weekend. But yeah, that's right. We'd like them to be tested.
Okay, so the Minister has told us this man was basically in the store for about 20 minutes. What was he up to?
Yep, 20 minutes. He did a lot of browsing in the health and beauty aisle, to be honest with you. So about 14 minutes in that aisle and then sort of 6 or so minutes wandering around the store and then he used the self-checkout to purchase his goods before he left.
It's a small metro store for people who don't know it, so that's quite a bit of time to be in there. So he's browsing the health and beauty aisle for about 14 minutes. What else is he doing?
Yeah, so after that he just kind of wanders around the store, sort of generally looking around, and then he's at the checkout for about 90 seconds, a minute and a half. And you're right, it's quite a small store, so the self-checkouts are about a metre apart. So there are a lot of people in the store, and he wasn't there for a pretty significant amount of time.
Did he have a phone with him? Was he on the phone at all or doing anything?
Yeah, he had a phone with him, and he was taking photos with the phone.
Selfies, you mean, Kitty?
Yeah, selfies. That's right.
Around the store?
Yeah. That's right.
Okay, so it is, again, a busy little store. So could you see whether he was coming close to any staff or any customers?
So we reviewed the footage obviously today, and he didn't interact with any customer or team member, which is good. But he was within a metre of customers during his time in the store, but only very briefly as customers passed him. But so we are confident, and the Ministry of Health is confident as well that the risk is very, very small. So everything we've done is precautionary, but it's to give reassurance to our team and to our customers that they've got the right support.
Understand. What did he buy in the end?
Stuff from the health and beauty aisle: toothpaste, body wash, and razors.
Right. Okay. So this is a guy who skipped out of isolation at Stamford Plaza, spent 20 minutes in the supermarket when he shouldn't, and has now caused your teams to be stood down in that supermarket to be closed for a day. What do you think of this?
Yeah, it's bitterly disappointing for our store, of course, but mostly for Auckland and all of New Zealand. It's really regrettable.
Yeah, what would you say?
Well, I'm very sorry for our team. I feel so sad for them.
Got anything to say to those people who are in managed isolation about what expectations are around their behaviours? Don't want any more visiting your store?
We can deliver toothpaste to you online. You don't need to leave to go to the stores. No, I guess I was listening to the Minister speak earlier. I guess do us a solid and follow the rules. Yeah, it's a terrible thing to put people at risk, even if it's not, going to actualise. The fear is so significant, right? It's very demoralising and disempowering for people.
Kerry, can you see when he heads off what direction he went in? Are you able to tell?
Oh, no, sorry, we can't see. We can just see him after he pays leaving the store.
Hey, the other thing was there was some confusion that he might be a fencing contractor. So he goes out to have a cigarette and there's a suggestion that he may have been mistaken for a fencing contractor. You've seen him. Is that feasible? I mean, was he in sort of casual gears, or what could you tell us about that?
Yeah, no, he doesn't look like a fencing contractor. He's in, very sort of nifty, quite trendy, casual clothes, mufti.
Right, understood.
He doesn't look like a worker, yeah.
Thanks for your time, Kitty. That's Kitty Hannafin, who is the spokesperson for the Countdown supermarket chain. Their Metro store in central Auckland has been shut down today because they're having to clean it after the person in isolation who tested positive for COVID-19 went wandering. The National Party is in damage control mode and urgently looking for a new candidate for its Southland electorate. It comes after MP Hamish Walker confessed to leaking the personal details of 18 COVID-19 cases to media. Hamish Walker will not seek re-election at this year's election after leader Todd Muller wrote to the board asking for him to be removed from the party. His resignation completely derailed what was set to be a big election year announcement from National today. The party is promising to build an Ashburton to Christchurch expressway.
Any questions about the road? Come on, 1.5 billion, 4-lane highway, fantastic.
Speaking to reporters at the announcement, leader Todd Muller said that there was only one option for Mr Walker.
His judgment was fundamentally flawed, and I'm on record a number of times now confirming that, and he's paid the ultimate price of doing that.
Some might argue National has a history of dirty politics. Why should Kiwis believe otherwise?
Well, that's just simply not true. This is an isolated incident, and you've got to see it through that lens, and I have acted very swiftly, and we've got the right outcome.
And Todd Muller apologised for the leak.
It was totally inappropriate for that personal information to be leaked to the media because they're New Zealanders who are suffering because they have COVID and they're in a particularly quarantined and constrained environment. So of course I apologise.
It took 4 days for Hamish Walker to come clean to his leader that he was behind the leak after seeking legal advice. Todd Muller was alerted around lunchtime on Monday. However, he pushed back against questioning that it showed he didn't have control of his own MPs.
No, it said that Hamish Walker went behind my back and made his own judgment, and I'm sure that he is ruining it today.
And he was adamant the leak hasn't undermined National's ability to criticise the government's COVID-19 response.
Even today, I understand there's another a potential breach in terms of someone going to a supermarket, from what I understand. So these things the government call glitches. Well, they're everyday glitches, and they're putting our capacity to recover as a country and to give New Zealand confidence that actually we have an economic recovery that's going to be underpinned by safe borders back every day because of their incompetence. So no, we will keep critiquing them.
Hamish Walker will be allowed to return to Parliament for the last sitting block and will remain on full pay before breaking for the election campaign. Todd Muller says the board will be looking at installing a new National Party candidate for Southland in the coming days. And just a reminder, we did ask Todd Muller to come on the program this evening for an interview, but he declined our offer. Meanwhile, residents in Hamish Walker's electorate are shocked he's behind the leak of COVID-19 patient details to media. Hamish Walker won nearly 60% of MP votes in the last election, but a new candidate is now being sought for the electorate. Tess Brunton has been speaking to local voters and filed this report from Queenstown.
Queenstown local Anne is disappointed to hear her electorate's MP is at the centre of the leak scandal. She says he's made a good call not to stand again after making so many question his values.
I think it's the right thing to do. It's very sad for him because I think that he could have had a good opportunity. Personally, I think he's made a poor decision.
But Arrowtown resident Kevin doesn't see it as a black and white issue, saying the devil will be in the details.
Is it an honest mistake? deliberate, I don't know. They'll have to look back down the chain of where it come from. Perhaps Michelle Bogue shouldn't have passed on information that was supposed to be kept to her and so forth. But young Hamish, if he's an honest mistake, then he probably shouldn't be prosecuted for it.
He doesn't agree with Mr Walker's decision not to contest his seat in the upcoming election.
That would be a big shame for such a young person that would have, I would say, a pretty good future in politics.
Arrowtown resident Verona isn't a fan of his politics, but says Hamish Walker worked hard at the coalface for his electorate. She is shocked to hear his involvement in the leak.
I never imagined that Hamish would have such terrible personal judgment. I'm definitely not a national supporter, a Labour person, but I thought he'd worked hard for this electorate, and I never imagined that he could sink to such low levels.
But Verona doesn't think it will end National's hold on the electorate.
It's a stronghold for National, you know, the whole southern area right down to the bottom of Southland, and I think it'll shock the National faithful, but they'll still be voting National. They've been voting National 60, 70 years, so that's not going to change. But it will be a shock to them.
Jules is visiting Arrowtown from the North Island. She's disappointed but not surprised a politician leaked information during an election year.
Like most of the country, thoroughly disappointed that somebody in high stature and high responsibility would allow that to happen. We all have access to sensitive information within our professional lives, but we choose not to share that, and I think it's diabolical what he did. Yeah.
Christchurch resident Ross is in Queenstown and says Hamish Walker has dug a hole he can't get out of and made the right decision not to run for re-election.
I was very surprised actually, because I didn't think that sort of thing would be happening in New Zealand so near to an election especially. Yeah, I'm disappointed.
Meanwhile, in Ashburton, where party leader Todd Muller was campaigning today, people had mixed feelings about his handling of the issue.
Oh, near enough. Not too bad.
How do you feel about what happened?
Oh, just one of those things, not a big deal. That's the trouble. Everyone makes a big deal about everything.
I saw him on the news this morning actually, and I thought he handled it reasonably well. Nobody wants to deal with that sort of stuff, but I think his handling of it was good.
Do you think he should have acted faster?
I guess he has to get his ducks in order and a line before he can start knocking them off, and I think he's done that.
Michael Heron QC is heading an inquiry into the leak of the highly sensitive information. Todd Muller says the board will be looking at installing a new National Party candidate for Southland in the coming days. In Queenstown for Checkpoint, Cor Tasbrunton, TNA.
It is almost 21 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Claims of dirty politics, cries of anger and disgust and clear bitter division. The usually circumspect arena of the Otago Regional Council chamber has had it all this morning as 3/4 of the councillors teamed up to roll former Labour Government Environment Minister Marion Hobbs as chair. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown was at the meeting and filed this report.
Councillor Calvert.
Yes.
Councillor Deaker. For. Councillor Forbes.
As the meeting's chair, Michael Laws, tallied the votes, tensions began to fray. It was soon clear that Marion Hobbs no longer had the confidence of the vast majority of councillors, and as Mr Laws read the final count, tensions boiled over, with protesters expressing their anger.
The motion is passed by 9 votes to 2 with 1 abstention. We now have to go to the next issue. All right, excuse me.
Shame on you.
Right.
Shame on all of you. Excuse you. Your children are walk away.
Point of order. Point of order.
Poor children.
They don't know what's coming for them.
Mr Chair, we're actually trying to conduct a meeting here, so understanding orders of, could you ensure that those outbreaks
This is
cease?
your last warning. If there is any more interruption, I will clear the gallery.
The meeting was adjourned for about quarter of an hour as councillors, including the deposed chair Marion Hobbs, alongside staff and security guards, tried to quell the situation. Ms Hobbs joined protesters in Waiata and shared hugs with some of the group before they left. She says the reason she was toppled is down to dirty politics and dirty water.
The councillors who signed the 27th of March letter calling a halt to water reforms are the same members who called for my removal. The inference is clear to me. I was too effective in pushing the water reforms.
She told her fellow councillors that she's shocked by how some of them treat staff and their dismissive attitudes.
I was puzzled at the beginning by councillors stating things, "We are in charge, they must obey us." It was really foreign to me. My experience as a minister taught me that I was only as good as the advice I received and challenged. But it was how we challenged and argued. It was done with respect. I never heard a minister yell at a civil servant, "You are wrong!"
After the protesters left, the meeting resumed with the selection of a new chair. Ms Hobbs asked Councillor Gretchen Robertson, who lost the leadership vote in October, whether she would stand. She thanked Ms Hobbs for the nod, but declined in the interest of unity, and only a single nomination, that of sheep and beef farmer and former Dunedin City Councillor Andrew Noon, was put forward. Before assuming the chair, he walked over to Ms Hobbs and offered her a handshake and a quiet word. After the meeting, he was conciliatory.
It's obviously a difficult process to go through. I've got a ton of respect for Marion. I wanted to just, I suppose, console her and just, you know, a quiet word. I won't even share that with the general public, but I think it was important that she's recognised for the value that she brings to the table, and we're looking forward to her contributing going forward.
Ms Hobbs says she's looking forward to more ardently pushing back against her political opponents, who she says have tried to use rumour to damage her reputation.
I got rung by a person in Oamaru telling me that another person had rung them who had been talked to by at least two of the councillors that I had dementia. Now, whether they said it, I mean, I can't prove any of it because it's gone through two or three people, but it's credible to me.
Mr Noon acknowledged the council has a mountain to climb going forward, but he believes there's more unity around the table than recent events suggest. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
The Army is getting an upgrade with the purchase of 43 Bushmaster armoured vehicles. They can fit and protect up to 10 Army personnel and are expected to be used both in New Zealand and overseas. Our reporter Logan Church and cameraman Dom Thomas filed this report.
Despite the bucketing rain, Defence Minister Ron Mark was in high spirits today, announcing to a group of soldiers at Linton Army Camp a large purchase of Bushmaster armoured vehicles.
The way in which we train, equip and prepare you is fundamental to how we're able to deploy, attack our missions, complete them successfully and get home safely. And some of us might have argued to continue to send you into operations with anything less than this was simply irresponsible.
The government's bought 43 of these Bushmaster vehicles at a cost of just under $103 million. Each one weighs 17 tonnes and can fit up to 10 Army personnel inside. They are replacing the Army's ageing Pinzgauer vehicle fleet. Major General John Boswell says these Bushmasters are a big step up.
The key difference is that the capacity of this vehicle in terms of both the equipment and manpower it can carry, in terms of its protection that it affords, and in terms of its employability across the spectrum of military operations. So this vehicle has a role from humanitarian assistance, disaster relief operations, both here in New Zealand and in the Southwest Pacific, all the way through to contributing to a combat environment, because it's got that level of protection that's required to afford our troops the protection that they need to operate effectively.
So what physical environments do you think these will be working in?
Okay, so let me paint a couple of pictures for you. We had to deploy the LAV to the Christchurch earthquake because it had the command and control systems and the mobility that allowed us to move freely around Christchurch at that time. Well, this vehicle can do that. We needed to provide protective vehicles to the police on a number of occasions over recent years. Sadly, primarily as a result of a shooting incident, these vehicles can deploy in support of the New Zealand Police. They're ideal for security operations in the Southwest Pacific, should we have incidents in places like that we have in the past, and then we can utilise it in peacekeeping operations overseas if we're committed to a UN mission.
These ones here today are already in use by New Zealand Special Forces. The new ones are not due until late 2022. They've been ordered from defence contractor Thales in Australia, where they are already in common use. Ron Mark says they offer better protection in modern warfare, especially with the increased use of improvised explosive devices. He says more than 100 strikes recorded against these vehicles overseas has resulted in no casualties.
IEDs are a preferred weapon in certain theatres, and hitting a soft convoy is an easy way of degrading an opposing force. These vehicles are specifically designed for that type of environment. They've been battle tested.
The Bushmasters are the second lot of new vehicles for the Army. A new fleet of Polaris all-terrain vehicles arrived this year. Ron Mark says more defence purchases are also in the pipeline, but wouldn't be drawn on what they might be. What else is in the pipeline?
We'll announce that soon. There is another announcement yet to come, but we can't do that today.
For Checkpoint, Logan Church.
And if you were listening to that on the radio on the drive home, you can see Logan and Dom's piece online. The video will be put up on our Facebook page. A lot of you getting in touch about the runner from isolation. Melanie says, I've been listening to your interview with Megan Woods while screaming at the car radio regarding the escapee from the Stamford Plaza and quarantine management during the COVID-19 crisis. While I believe the government is by and large doing a good job, one thing keeps really irritating me. All government spokespeople, including the Prime Minister, keep referring to the need to follow the rules. This is not a game. These are not rules, they are laws. The fight to keep the New Zealand community safe from COVID-19 is not a game of cricket or soccer or bridge. It is potentially a fight against death, the death of our people and the death of our economy. The government must introduce a more punitive set of penalties to ram home the importance of compliance. We are seen as a soft touch often because of the language we use. I believe there could well be a cultural disconnect which could potentially lead to similar problems like the Stamford Plaza case. You have to have some sympathies for the others in quarantine who are playing by the rules, says Julia. And Mark says when people in quarantine leave their rooms, they should have to wear their personal barcodes on a lanyard around their neck. Security scans every time someone walks past them. No barcode, no exit. This process is used at large-scale events. A lot of you also think we need to ramp up the penalties. John says those who don't abide by the isolation conditions should be penalised as harshly as possible. Current penalties are too lenient, says John. We understand, just before we go, all the power is back on in Auckland. Have a great night. First up, we'll be back with you first thing in the morning.
6, the government is looking at ways to electronically track people in managed isolation facilities after a COVID-19 positive guest in Auckland broke out and went to a supermarket. A spokesperson for Countdown says the man was taking selfies as he walked around the store in Victoria Street West. Voters and National MP Hamish Walker's electorate are shocked he's behind a leak of private coronavirus patients' details. And the Victorian Premier has apologised for a 6-week lockdown that will affect about 5 million people living in Melbourne from midnight. Those are the headlines. Our next news is at 7.
Tonight on Nights, we are going to the toilet for this week's Hump Quiz. Our window on the world asks, why does COVID-19 rob so many of their sense of taste? We're in the cockpit for this week's episode of Spitfire, the People's Plane. And Anton Young and Jack Chapman talk about To the Line.